and welcome everybody to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue MacDonald. I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals and the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, and it's my pleasure to be chairing the session today. It's actually session 13 of series 17 of the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, just in case you're keeping track of this in your own little diary. And we're joined by Dr. Carmen Power and Laura Godfrey Isaacs this evening. And because we always do this to our guests, we invite them to share a moment of the week with us. So Laura, welcome. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Have you got a moment of the week you'd like to share?
Thanks, Sue. It's lovely to be here. Actually, I've had quite a momentous week because I'm going on a sabbatical for a year
Oh,
from clinical work as a midwife.
oh,
So I had my last shift yesterday, and I was given some lovely flowers by my colleagues, and I made some cakes and we had lots of hugs. And I feel sort of sad because I'm going to miss them and miss the women that I look after, but also quite excited and looking forward to this sabbatical year where I'm going to be actually looking after my elderly mum, but also trying to get on with some other projects and creative books and things that I'm moving forward with. So,
fabulous. Well, Laura's always up to something creative just because of her background and her passions. Thank you so much. That's fantastic for sharing that with us. Carmen, welcome to the hour and thank you so much for coming. Do you have a similar moment of the week to share?
Hi, Sue. I don't know if mine is as life-changing, but it was really lovely. I think my moment of the week would have to be my lunch with Professor Leslie Page,
Oh,
who wrote the foreword for my book. And we just had a really lovely few hours together in Oxford, touring the Oxford colleges for lunch and then afternoon tea and just having a real heart-to-heart. It was really nice and well worth the 7 hours it took me to get there and back on the trains that were
oh my goodness.
very unreliable and delayed and missed connections because of
wow,
the weather or Christmas or something. A leaf on
gosh.
mine, but yeah, we had a lovely day.
That sounds a wonderful day to be sharing, and especially with Leslie. And we'll send some love to Leslie. I'm sure she's watching this evening, so I think
Oh,
she
she's an
does
icon.
come in.
Uh,
And yeah, real icon actually. And she's very precious to us as midwives, of course, isn't she? So thank you for sharing those two moments of the week. I'm just going to go a little bit because I know we've got some new people with us this evening and we've got our old friends. So welcome to both groups. It's wonderful that you're with us this evening. This is our last hour for this year because we're having a little break and I'll talk a bit of that later. And just for the new people who've come in, just to say the Maternity and Midwifery Hour started at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, the first lockdown in the UK in England, which was in March 2020, which sometimes it seems a lifetime away, and then it seems not really so far away when you're seeing people in masks at the moment trying to avoid getting flu. But we started this hour really because midwives, student midwives, and people within the maternity services weren't able to go to study days or conferences or festivals. So we wanted some way of just connecting people and making sure they got some information and shared information. And the initial weeks we looked a lot about service as kind of reorganization design, a lot about what was happening with student midwives in to make sure they got all their experience and their information they needed, but were kept safe. There were a lot of creative things that went on in that time. And we've kind of carried on. I mean, obviously, COVID is still around, but not to the extent of a pandemic. And it's proved to be quite successful, and people quite like coming in every week. And at this point, I have to also underline all of the maternity and midwifery events are recorded. So if you should have a power cut or you have to rush away, don't panic. You won't miss anything this evening because you can catch up at a later point when you get given code to get in and look at it again. So you don't miss anything. And that can be really useful if you have a very complex session that we have sometimes that you have to think about, little reflect, and then when you want to rewatch, maybe share it with some friends and colleagues and actually talk about it. And that can be really useful. Also very useful, our friends at Matflix look after all the back catalogue. Incredibly useful if you're doing any things like dissertations or projects, or you want to update yourself for perhaps a revalidation, or loads and loads of materials. The only health warning I would say is that once you go into Matflix and you start looking at some of the presentations, it's a little bit addictive and a couple of hours can go past quite easily. So that's your health warning for this evening. But do access, share as much as you can. We're very happy for you to do so. Now, I'm just going to do a quick swizzle through the news, and I'm reiterating or reminding people about the Iolanthe Midwifery Trust Awards, which were open last week, I think, and are still going until the 1st of February. Very useful if you're a student midwife or you're doing any piece of project work, because there's lots and lots of different categories that you can look at. For example, projects or training to improve maternity care of vulnerable pregnant women and birthing people. That's the Nicolette Peel Award. The Nora Faith Coniam Award for improving midwifery care and practice around baby loss. And the Dora Poku Midwives Award for self-development training, research, improving local services. Not masses of money, but enough to make a real difference if you're doing this sort of work. So do go and have a look. The link is on your resources that Paul is sharing online at the moment. And it's worth going for this, really worth having a look. And if you don't find it useful, you might know a midwife or a student midwife who'd be interested. So keep your ears and eyes open. I think this week, a lot of it's been talking about the review into maternity services, because you'll know that Baroness in England, Baroness Amos, is looking at the maternity services in England. And she released some kind of reflections yesterday on her experience of hearing mums and parents talking about the loss of their babies and their experience of the maternity services. And I have to say, listening to it was very painful as a midwife. I'm very sad, because obviously, there are a lot of successes and success stories, I guess, of women and families who have a good experience. But of course, for those people who have a bad experience, it's really awful. And it can affect people for a long, long time, if not probably forever. And it made me think about the experiences I've had as a midwife, where I've really been very aware of the need to really listen to women, not just take the notes and ticky the box, but actually listen to what women say and listen to what their fears are. Really important. And remember, they remember every detail. If you say something offhand, they'll remember that forever. And you don't necessarily mean to be unkind or uncaring, but that's how it can be experienced. And we really need to be aware of that. We need our compassion and our care at the fore at all times. Really important. We'll I know we're going to come back to this topic over the coming months. So this is just a little reflection of mine. And the other reflection I've got is, because of COVID and what I said about masks earlier, there's a whole lot of flu around at the moment. I know our Laura's not feeling too perky because she's got a sore throat and a cold. And it's just a kind of reminder to us to maybe think about if you've got a cold or you've got flu. I mean, if you're really ill, you won't be out and about. But if you're out and about, you need to wear a mask. Common sense, I would say, but it kind of reminds me of the time we were all wearing masks, and that's the time I didn't get a cold at all, which was the one good thing about COVID. Not really, only a very tiny thing, really. Also, I think this is, I've got a little note to myself. Check out, I didn't put it on the resources list, but we'll put it on later, Roy Lilly's blog. I know probably some of you see his he's often features on radio programs and TV programs. He's an ex NHS chair, NHS Trust chair, and has a whole blog where he looks at different things. And he was looking at the maternity review today, and it makes very interesting reading. Don't agree with everything, but there's a lot of good things in what he says, which you'll find interesting. Okay, now I feel as I'm chasing around here very quickly. Now we're looking, and I'm putting a very short thing on this, but we're looking at information and knowledge available to women and families and to us as health professionals, including midwives and student midwives. And we have two wonderful speakers this evening who are going to kind of introduce us in a very interesting way. I know you're going to enjoy this. And first of all, I'm delighted to introduce formally Laura Godfrey-Isaacs, she's an award-winning writer, graphic artist, midwife, and creative producer, working at the intersection of women's health, feminism, and visual storytelling. And I think the story she's going to tell is going to be really interesting to you. Her career has been dedicated to exploring the lived experience and politics of the representation of women's bodies, from her beginnings as a feminist artist in the 1990s to her current practice in midwifery and graphic medicine. So welcome, Laura. The screen is yours, and thank you so much for coming to share some of your work with us this evening.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, and hello, everybody. So yeah, I've come to talk to you about this book that I created with a cartoonist, Lily Williams, a pregnancy and birth, a graphic guide. And you can see some drawings on the right-hand side that Lily's depicted us. So that's me looking quite funny in my uniform, which I don't wear that much because I'm a community midwife, but nevertheless, that's me in my uniform. And on the right-hand side, that's Lily. She actually had a baby during the process of us making this book, as often happens, as did the editor. And that's her, eating some pizza whilst looking after her baby on her shoulder there. So this was a really interesting endeavor for me. So I've been in midwifery for 14 years. As you might have picked up from my bio, I had a sort of career before that in the arts, as a visual artist, academic, and now I've sort of developed a writing practice and now really interested in this graphic form. And that led me to work with Lily to create this guide to pregnancy and birth, trying to create a really accessible, visually appealing guide, which I'll just go on to the next slide, which sits within this genre, which you may or may not be familiar with, of graphic medicine. So graphic medicine is actually kind of a global movement. You can look up their website, Graphic Medicine, and it's really, as the quote says at the bottom there, the intersection between cartoons and the discourse of healthcare. So you'll find if you go to their website, or if you like graphic novels or graphic memoirs, that there are actually lots of people creating graphic novels. So using cartooning and image and text together to explore healthcare, whether it's their own stories of illness or whether it's, talking about a particular condition. So it's become a really powerful form to communicate in this very kind of visual, direct way with people. So I felt it could be really interesting to explore how we could do a pregnancy and birth guide in this form. So rather than, I often think these pregnancy and birth guides, they're like huge tomes, they're sort of hugely thick with lots of text, and people are sort of thumbing through it all, and I think it can be a bit overwhelming. Whereas this form, graphic medicine, or graphic novels, can be a way of like getting information across in this kind of quite immediate way through the visual form, and then the text is quite reduced, it's quite condensed. And this was a really lovely review actually that we had of the guide. You can see here on the Graphic Medicine website, which was really nice. And I think it kind of encapsulates what we were trying to do. So beyond the form itself, which, as I was explaining, is kind of quite radical in this space, it's also, and she coins this in lovely ways, a manifesto for compassionate, intersectional, and visually literate healthcare. It stands both as an artwork and an ethical document, one that reimagines pregnancy not as a condition to be managed, but as a story to be shared. So with the book, we were also trying to make it more than just, information giving. And this kind of fits in with my own practice when I'm talking to women and people who birth in my own practice as a midwife. I always try to, as far as possible, kind of give the context of how things have come to be, give them lots of choices, help them to make the choices that are right for them by looking quite holistically at their lives, at the sort of whole landscape of maternity care. And so you can see here, this is actually the first page, welcome to one of the most significant adventures of your life. And here we're trying to explore this sort of whole journey of pregnancy, birth, and new parenting, and framing it, looking at some sort of historical issues, some social, and also the psychological landscape. So it's not just about information giving, it's really a kind of a broad brush approach. And you can see this slide here, throughout this journey to parenthood, you are likely to feel a mixture of emotions, excitement, fear, ambivalence, and at times you'll probably feel overwhelmed. This is all normal. So it's also trying to not sort of give this kind of toxic positivity about everything's going to be fabulous, everything's wonderful. We know the reality of pregnancy, birth, and new parenthood is often, quite challenging, and people have journeys where unexpected things happen. And I think it's really important to give a kind of a realistic picture of what might happen for people. It was also important for us to try to bust some kind of taboos. And this was visually as well as in the information. So on the right-hand side, you can see a depiction of actually a baby's head crowning. Now, this is actually quite a taboo image, but you can kind of get away with it by using a drawing, whereas actually images of babies' heads crowning are often censored or seen as almost obscene. So it was really important for me as a midwife that we didn't, steer away from that reality of birth. And somehow you can actually take quite a lot of artistic license when something is drawn as opposed to a photograph. And some of the other aspects here, we've got a page on, what is normal or natural birth. I'm sure a lot of you will recognize that that's become quite a contentious subject, unfortunately, become quite a polarized debate. And so again, trying to introduce these issues and discuss them rather than kind of steering away from them. So here, this is a little potted history about the medicalization of birth, and that was undoubtedly brought in to try and make birth safer, but it's actually some of the consequences of that has meant that there's often over medicalization, and there's a lot of kind of people's bodies being observed and categorized, and lots of strategies then have been brought in to try and reduce the amount of medicalization. So there's quite a dynamic there that we try to address. It's also been important to try to empower people to navigate their way through maternity services. I mean, one of the first things I say to people when I do that booking appointment, the first appointment is, you might be quite surprised about the number of questions that I'm going to ask you in this appointment. It might be the first time that you've actually sat down with a healthcare practitioner for maybe an hour or more, and they're going to be asking you about your medical history, your social circumstances. And that can seem quite intrusive and quite weird and difficult for people, particularly maybe people who've been very healthy, perhaps, and it's the first time they've been in this situation. So again, we've tried to explain how maternity services work, and also talk about some of the sort of political aspects here, the politics of pregnancy and birth, and how it's been depicted in the media, how it's been portrayed in society. And so again, trying to give that sort of broader context to this experience that they're going to go through. Inevitably, obviously, it's a guide, so we wanted to provide the sort of clear evidence-based information for people that they will be looking for in this kind of a publication, but again, communicated, excuse me, in a friendly, non-judgmental, but also concise way, so that people could, kind of absorb some of these more complex issues around the clinical care. So here, talking about the first trimester. The first trimester of pregnancy runs from conception to 12 weeks gestation. Many physical changes in early pregnancy are hidden and you won't be showing yet, but there are lots of things going on. So you may feel very tired, you may have morning sickness, you may have tender breasts or chest tissue, you may pee more often, and then that nice diagram sort of showing how everything in your body is changing. We know, if we're practitioners, your heart actually expands, gets bigger, your blood volume increases. And there are all the different things that are going on in your uterus with the fluid and where your cervix is. So trying to give information, evidence-based information, but trying to do it in a really clear and concise way. We also try to cover, again, trying to be open about what can sometimes happen, such as baby loss, the issues of infertility, and your baby might need special care. We know 1 in 10 babies, for example, are born premature and may need to go into special care. So trying to address some of those stigmas, making sure that we're being really open and honest about things that can happen. You know, we know 1 in 4 pregnancies actually don't progress. So it's possible that people, even if they're reading the book in early pregnancy, may go on to have a loss, or they may have had multiple losses. They may have experienced infertility treatment where they might have had multiple losses, and then they're getting to this pregnancy and they may have a lot of anxiety at that point. So trying to really open up all these kind of scenarios. We have a big section on infant feeding, and in this section, try to, again, look at some historical perspectives on how have we got to where we've got to. So we know that there are sort of directives or recommendations to exclusively breastfeed for 6 months, but we also know in the UK that only 1% of women are actually exclusively breastfeeding at 6 months. So what is the politics? What's got us to where we are now? What are some of the barriers that are in the way of people perhaps realizing their feeding goals? And what are the different types of support that you can get? And again, talking about bottle feeding as well, which of course can be with express breast milk as well as with formula milk. So trying to, not be judgmental, not be directive in our information, but really kind of flesh out the issues for people so that they can hopefully make the right choices for them. We do have a section on parenting. So obviously we're not creating a book, and there are plenty out there on the market, that is focusing much on the baby care, but more looking at what are some of the priorities in that first bit, we as and around baby wearing as well. So yeah, it's been a very nice project to work on. We've also had a lot of support from within the profession, lots of people having a look at copies for us and giving us really nice quotes. This is Leah Hazard, who's an amazing midwife writer who wrote Womb and also Hard Pushed, and she talks about it being an inclusive rights-based approach. So you can see on the cover there, it's a really kind of inclusive guide. So we've got, a Muslim woman, we've got a Black woman, we've got a white woman, we've got a trans person who's pregnant. So we're really trying to signal, and this runs throughout the whole book, that we're trying to write this for anyone that might be going through this process, and not making assumptions about what people's circumstances might be, but trying to have this really open approach with lots of different bits of information, lots of ways of trying to help people make choices as they go through this journey. And you can see that the image in the middle is actually the image that's on the back. So that also indicates to you that we've got this kind of narrative arc in the book. So we start obviously with a little bit of background about actually the history of midwifery and obstetric care, kind of looking at the politics of maternity care, introducing who is the maternity team that you might be working with, and then we go into the actual more guide information about the first trimester, second trimester, then into birth, and then into postnatal period as well, and postnatal recovery. And you can see on the back the characters that Lily has drawn all the way through the book. You follow them through the book, so you see them repeatedly, so you start to recognize these characters and hopefully identify with some of them. And then on the back you can see that's one of the last pages on the inside of the book, and on the back as well, showing our characters that we've followed through with their babies. So if you want to use that QR code, that will take you straight to Icon Books, who are the publisher of the book. If you want to get a copy for yourself, I would say it's a good companion if you are a student midwife, or any kind of healthcare professional working in maternity, because it's bang up to date at the moment with all the research. And it's also, as I hopefully have indicated, it's very holistic. So it covers the kind of politics and human rights in maternity. There's a big section on infant feeding. So I think that it's a good guide for healthcare workers, as well as, I would say, a really nice thing to give to an expectant mum or person that's going to have a baby, or they're a new mother. And I think it's something that can be dipped into. So whatever stage you're at, you can sort of find the information that you want, and maybe subsequent pregnancies as well. And that's my website as well, if you want to have a look at some of the other stuff that I've been doing, writing. And also I run Maternal Journal, which is another sort of creative project, working particularly with new mums. So yeah, I really hope that you'll enjoy it, and maybe check out the Graphic Medicine website as well, and have a look at all the other amazing kind of graphic novels that people have written about sort of healthcare or issues in healthcare. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. I mean, it's really interesting to kind of think of good, because people often think comics or cartoons are either political or there's sort of something for children in a way. But this is it's quite fun, and it is very accessible, and you can follow the stories, which I think,
Yeah.
especially as women, I think we really love story. I know midwives love a story as well, so it sort of chimes with us. Now, audience out there, if you've got some questions for Laura, start putting them in the little chat box, and they'll come through right at the end of the session. So thank you, Laura, for starting us off on that. It's great.
Pleasure.
And you see Laura's voice held out really well. So
I'm going to have a good cough now. Shall I stop sharing? Oh,
yes, well. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. And so we'll now move on and to introduce, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Carmen Power. She's an independent researcher, consultant, writer, and educator on mother and infant perinatal well-being and the impacts of physical and psychological birth experiences on bonding, baby behavior, and infant development. She also teaches psychology, education and public health, and is a member of WAIMH, which I'm sure she's going to share with us, and SRIP, and is the author of Birth, Bonding and Baby Behavior, which explores the links between childbirth experience and early infant behavior. So welcome, Carmen. The screen is now yours, and thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thanks so much for having me, Sue. Can you hear me okay? Great. So hello, everyone. I'm also going to be talking about my new book, and it's about the subject of my PhD in public health, so birth, bonding and baby behavior, and that's also the title of the book. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so what happens to the baby during childbirth? Do we want babies to thrive or only to survive? And those of you who were here last week would have heard Sue Downs speaking about this, and about what needs to happen for mothers to thrive after childbirth, how midwives as well as mothers release oxytocin during a positive birth, often walking away on a high. And she also talked about how midwives need to be granted the time and autonomy to give the kind of care that they want to give and that they came into midwifery expecting to give, and how important this is, because all the oxytocin going on in the room really contributes to a successful birth, and that's physically as well as psychologically, and also to bonding and breastfeeding for mother and baby. It also means that babies are more likely to be born alert and content rather than crying and fussing, and this is what I found in my research. So it's easy to think that the baby's behavior post-birth doesn't matter, but it really does. It matters to the baby and it matters to the parents, and we can possibly influence this. So what if I told you that babies who are born alert and content are more likely to become easy alert and responsive older babies, and babies who are born crying and fussing are more likely to become irritable and unsettled older babies, and that some of this behavior alongside inherited character traits is due to the kind of birth that baby had. But even more, it's due to how the baby's mother perceived the birth. Were they supported, not just physically, but also emotionally? Did they have enough people there to provide the support, such as a partner, continuous care from a midwife, and I know that's becoming more and more rare unless you're lucky enough to be in an area where you can have a home birth, and possibly a doula or close friend too. Or was the mother left on her own a lot as the midwives were run off their feet, attending to lots of other mothers and probably doing this on limited sleep and food? Was the partner sent home during a nighttime induction? Or did the hospital not allow them into the bathroom while the mother took a bath because this meant walking through a labour ward? So all these things happened to all the mothers that I spoke to, what each of these things happened to someone. Did the mother feel anxious, afraid, and neglected during the birth, and distressed or depressed afterwards? All these things really affect how the mother and baby feel and behave after birth and beyond into their new life together. And this affects the baby's behavior and how easy or difficult it is for the parents to bond with that baby. And with all the recent publicity about birth trauma, with the birth trauma inquiry happening in 2024, and Theo Clark, who led that, was on Woman's Hour talking about it again yesterday, we've at least become a bit more concerned about what happens to the mother emotionally during childbirth. But we're not always so tuned in to what might be going on for the baby, who is also already a thinking, feeling human being. And we know that now, and I provide all the evidence on that in my book. A physically live, healthy baby is as far as most people go when they think about birth outcomes, and hence the polarized thinking that is happening at the moment. But what if we set this, a live baby, as a 21st century baseline, and then asked, what can we do to maximize this baby's chance of thriving as well as surviving post-birth and into infanthood, childhood, and adolescence? So let's turn to the birth and the postnatal days. We know from research by Professor Ruth Feldman, who's based in Israel and has done lots and lots of work on what she calls biobehavioral synchrony between the mother and the baby. And we know from her that mother-baby bonding and that early biobehavioral synchrony where the mother and baby, and also the other parent, father, partner, and baby, tuned into each other and kind of their hormones are in sync, and how they tune into each other during those early days really can affect just their relationship, not just through childhood, but also adolescence and into early adulthood. So she's conducted a longitudinal study until I think the child is 22, and you can still see the same biobehavioral synchrony patterns that were there in babyhood in early adulthood, which I find fascinating. As one health visitor I interviewed said, the birth does affect the baby, and then of course it does have, an effect on the physical and mental well-being and the stability of the family as well. So that affects how the baby's being cared for and how the parents generally attach and bond with that newborn. So the baby behavior seems to affect the bonding process, and the bonding process seems to affect the baby behavior. I took this photo with the mother's permission in Finland last summer as I was there for the World Congress on Infant Mental Health. So those acronyms that you gave at the beginning, Sue, sorry I hadn't spelled them out before, but it's the World Association for Infant Mental Health. I'm a big fan of going to their conferences, and also SHRIP, the Society for Reproductive and Infant Psychology, and I was a committee member till very recently. I just stepped down. So I was there for that, and it was amazing because Finland, as with all the Scandinavian countries really, knows how to care for people during their most vulnerable times, and this includes babies, young children, and new parents as well as old people. Although a lot of the Finns are now nervous because their newish right-wing government is fast on doing some brilliant policies that have made them famous worldwide, on the whole, Scandinavian countries are still excellent compared with us at caring for parents and babies. And as we know, the care that mothers and babies receive from the beginning of pregnancy through to the baby is at least 2 years old is so important and will make all the difference to how well that baby does in terms of successful breastfeeding, forming, if the mother's chosen to breastfeed, of course, forming a strong attachment with their parents and wider family, their social and emotional development, and their future physical and mental health. So the first 1,001 days are crucial, and it all begins in the womb, and it all begins with that care that the mother and the baby are receiving. So caring compassionately for mothers and babies is not just an extra topping, it really is absolutely vital. So I'm going to quickly talk you through some of the studies that I include in my book, as well as lots and lots of other research. The healthcare professionals that I interviewed, who between them had witnessed thousands of births, were so full of wisdom and insights, and had such a lot to say about how the birth might influence the baby's behaviour. Talk first about the physical birth processes and how these could impact the baby's behaviour. So how the birth went, what happened, which pain relief the mother ended up having, the hormonal exchanges between mother and baby. Some of them also talked about the impacts of medical interventions on the baby, including interfering with natural oxytocin production. And in this situation, like through inductions, which are becoming so normalized, the mother lacks this natural form of pain relief from her own oxytocin produced in her own body, so may end up with more need for pethidine or epidural, which could impact the baby's early behavior. Early postnatal moments were thought to be really important too. So everything from the birth environment, whether it was cozy and peaceful or noisy and brightly lit with lots of disturbances, through to postnatal events, like whether the mother and baby were separated post-birth or had the chance to be together having skin to skin. These things were all considered really vital to positive outcomes. And these positive outcomes were how the baby behaves after the birth and how the mother feels and how easy the mother finds it to bond with the baby. Right, I've lost my cursor. Oh, there it is. But it's not just about what happens physically during the birth. Midwives, health visitors, and doulas all really strongly felt that psychological factors are equally important. We have to ask how mothers feel during and after childbirth to really know how they and the baby will do in the days, weeks, and months that follow. And this all depends on the mother's response to the birth, and that's affected by both the physical and emotional aspects of the birth. Her relationships with the caregivers during and after birth, pre-birth expectations, and these can be around the birth, the baby, and around mothering, like expecting it to be love at first sight with her baby, whereas it often takes a while to build. And importantly, mother's postnatal well-being. So is the mother in good physical and mental health, or has the birth really knocked them? Are they feeling empowered and euphoric, or distressed and depressed? And all of this also affects baby behaviour, according to the healthcare professionals that I spoke to. So what long-term impact could modern childbirth practices be having on mother and baby? And some of them also spoke about this. What's happening to the baby when it misses out on these hormonal exchanges that occur during a spontaneous physiological birth? And although, like Laura was saying, medical interventions are needed sometimes and they can be life-saving, so thank goodness we have them as a safety net, what happens to mothers and babies, and what are the impacts on our society when they become so mainstream that in some areas only 25% of mothers and babies are experiencing spontaneous labour and birth? And what happens to the baby's stress response system when he's immediately separated from his mother, whether that be for medical checks, weighing, or a trip to NICU? Could we try to always care for mother and baby together, no matter what happens, as they do in Sweden, where they've adopted a zero separation policy for all newborns? I read a study when I was writing my book as the World Health Organization, and they'd begun a large study across parts of India and Africa in 2021, looking at differences in outcomes between preemie babies placed in incubators, or low-weight babies as well, and babies in the intervention group having skin to skin with the parent. And they had to suddenly halt the study when they found that the findings were so stark. Premature and low-weight babies were much more likely to survive on their mother's chest than in an incubator, because the pair synchronize their breathing, heart rate, and hormones. And of course, the skin-to-skin time releases oxytocin in both the parent and the baby. So that helps reduce stress in both, as well as helps to prevent postnatal depression, and therefore it supports the bonding and attachment processes. So promoting skin-to-skin is especially important after a complicated birth. I also spoke to mothers, and as you can see here, babies were more likely to be unsettled in their behaviour after a medicalised birth than they were after a spontaneous physiological one. There were some exceptions to this rule, however. Babies were reported as being more settled after a planned cesarean or a planned induction, where the mother had made an informed choice for a valid medical reason, than they were after an emergency C-section or an in-labour induction or acceleration, where they may have been expecting a different type of birth and they may have felt coerced or rushed into making a decision without being given enough information. So mothers really need to be, parents need to be given plenty of information and, if possible, the time to make the decisions that are right for them. Because as well as affecting how the mother feels about the birth, midwives and health visitors really felt that this kind of birth affects the baby's mood and behaviour after birth, making it more difficult for the mothers to bond. This graph shows how mothers describe their babies after their subjective birth experiences. So when I asked them to just give me their overall experience, the mothers who'd had a positive birth experience, all of them reported their babies as settled, compared with only a small number of settled babies after a mixed or negative birth experience. Oh, none after a negative birth experience, in fact. So what makes a birth experience positive or negative? And I'm going to use one of the mothers I interviewed as an example of what can happen, how it can make a mother feel when the birth goes wrong. So Ava, we'll call her Ava, told me, I said, well, I'm having a water birth. And the doctor said, oh, no, you're not. You've gone over 24 hours now. So I lost the plot and burst out crying. And they'd insisted on doing the continuous fetal monitoring that she was finding really difficult to cope with because it meant that she couldn't move around. And she said, I wasn't really allowed to move. I don't know why they don't just do it intermittently. It's horrendous pain. I kept saying I needed the toilet just so I could get the straps off me. And then in terms of her baby after the birth, she said, well, she first of all told me how the baby was really distressed and had a forceps mark down his cheek and was crying a lot and seemed to be, she thought he was maybe in pain when she was trying to hold his head and breastfeed him. And she said, I think as a result of that I didn't feel I could bond with him at all well. We really struggled with him the first couple of weeks. Have I done the right thing having a baby? All this jazz. So mothers like Ava, who had a really challenging birth involving lots of unexpected changes and trauma, as you can see, felt really conflicting emotions postnatally. And I think the main thing here was that she just felt really out of control. And when mothers are distressed, their babies become distressed as well. So it's a bit of a catch-22 because then a distressed baby makes a distressed mother feeds into the distressed baby. And then they can get into a negative cycle post-birth. So the opposite of the positive biobehavioral synchrony that Ruth Feldman talks about, it can just get off to a bad start if things like this go wrong. Bonding is what we want to happen between parents and babies, as this makes for strong, secure attachments, benefits infant development in all areas, but especially socially and emotionally. So this means the baby's more likely to make good friends, do well in school, form positive adult relationships, and have strong physical and mental health. And when bonding's disturbed, everything that follows it gets disturbed. So what can we do to ensure that parents and babies get time, space, and support to bond, especially after a difficult birth? And how can mothers like Ava be supported to bond with their baby during following a traumatic birth experience? Supporting breastfeeding without judgment, if that mother's chosen to breastfeed, can be really beneficial. And there's studies to show that breastfeeding, if the mother is well supported and if that's her choice, can help to prevent postnatal depression as well as encourage bonding. She's just amazing, said Ava about her health visitor. I call her the boob whisperer because she calmed me more than anything. She just chilled me out and I didn't feel like she was judging me because I can't do it. So in Ava's words, just supporting mothers without judgment can chill them out and enable them to get the hang of mothering without feeling a failure and therefore without any guilt or shame, those two emotions that we know occur really frequently in new mothers. Another mother, Kate, told a very similar story. She also felt she had to lie to the healthcare professionals to get what she wanted, which was just to go home and settle her baby. I was lying to the midwife, saying she was latching on because I was so desperate to go home. Then this lovely Colombian midwife saved the day. She literally grabbed my boob and flung it in the baby's mouth. So that's how it's done. So apart from supporting mothers who want to breastfeed, what else promotes happy mothers and babies? In a survey we conducted of over 1,000 mothers, what most led to crying, fussing newborn was assisted birth, maternal anxiety, and postnatal stress. So reducing mothers' stress and anxiety during and after childbirth seems to help the newborn to feel less distressed too. And the newborn's more likely to be alert and content than crying and fussing if the mother has had positive birth emotions and experiences physical well-being afterwards, so doesn't feel in pain or exhausted or completely wiped out by the birth. Then we explored which factors contribute most to older babies being unsettled, irregular in their routines of feeding, pooing and sleeping, and irritable during their feeds. And the answers were clear here too. So if mothers felt anxious and afraid during the birth, they were much more likely to have unsettled babies who were irregular in their routines. And if they felt sad, well, depressed after the birth, they were more likely to have these unsettled, irritable babies too. Yeah, so as you can see from this, it was the subjective psychological factors that came through as predictors. It was the subjective birth experience that really seemed to matter. And it was the same when we looked at what led mothers to perceive their babies as alert and responsive and easy overall. The really strong findings were that if the mother reported a supported birth experience and had lots of support in the birth room, including not just a midwife, but a birth partner and an extra companion, ideally. And we know from all the doula studies of the 1970s and 80s that doulas are really effective in keeping the birth on track, reducing the birth time, reducing the need for medication, reducing the incidence of postnatal depression afterwards. So that's no surprise really, because a happy mother makes a happy baby. So if the mother felt positive postnatally, her baby was more likely to be happy, no matter what kind of birth she'd had. Compassionate care, it seems, enables the mother and baby to thrive, not just survive. And guess what? Partners need it too. So let me get onto the right slide. Yeah, I just saw this study this morning actually on my little train ride into Bristol. It came through as a Google Scholar alert, how if the father is anxious and depressed after the birth, that will affect not just the mother's mood, but also the way she feels able to bond with her baby. So the father's mood affects not just the way he bonds with the baby, and presumably this applies to partners too. It was a Portuguese study, so they were talking about fathers. So it doesn't just affect the way the fathers bond with the baby. The way the father feels after birth affects how the mother bonds with the baby. So I thought that was fascinating. So obviously the whole family is tuned in to one another, and they're all going through this big hormonal exchange that Sue was talking about last week, because we know that hormones are contagious. So stress is contagious, and oxytocin, the love hormone, is also contagious. So this early relationship building that midwives are really ideally placed to support could affect that little family for the rest of their lives. So it's just so important that compassionate care is provided. But of course, midwives are really overstretched at the moment. So you all really need to look after yourselves too. If you'd like to read more about this topic, my new birth, bonding and baby behaviour book is out and available in Waterstones and foils, or you can order a copy using this QR code. Or hopefully, because it is quite expensive, because Springer have published it in their nursing and midwifery category, so it's officially like for university, it's officially an academic book, which means it's hideously expensive. So hopefully, if you're a student midwife or a lecturer, you can download it for free from your university. For regular updates, you're welcome to email me if you have any extra questions after this session. But for regular updates, including my exciting upcoming New Year project, which will be a collaboration with the Birth Trauma Association on birth trauma bonding and baby behaviour. So I'm really looking forward to that. Do follow me on my very new Instagram page. So it's like shouting into an echo chamber now, trying to use Twitter, isn't it? Just everybody's left. There's no point. So I thought, okay, I better get to grips with Instagram, and I'm not to grips with it at all, but I'm trying. So I could do with some new friends out there. So do feel free to check me out and follow me, and I will be posting regular updates once I get the hang of it. And thanks so much for joining us all tonight, and to all the midwives listening, do take care of yourselves too.
Yes, Carmen, thank you so much. I mean, I love the comment about Instagram. I just can't get it. I don't get it myself. And I have to be
complicated. Leslie said she can't get it either. Yeah.
I think I'll have to try, because I know a lot of very good discussions go on, but I haven't kind of got into it. And I have to be on Twitter for this on every Wednesday, because this is how we use our questions and things. And I've gone on to Blue Yonder, which is a bit kinder. I think it's like Twitter used to be. Is it Blue Yonder? Am I right?
I think I tried that and then decided that nobody I knew was on it. So yeah,
there are some, but you have to look for them. So it's, you know, you get used to other avenues, don't you? But thank you so much. That's really interesting. And it actually, as a midwife, this feels a heck of a responsibility. It feels quite scary to think that we need to make sure that the mother and the partner, or the other partner, whether it's father or whatever, all feel supported and positive about the birth. That's quite a big thing to cope with. Really important. I guess some of it we take for granted that we can achieve, but to think about long-term effects, that is scary.
Yeah, I mean, I do talk in our book as well about the importance of supporting the partner and partner's mental health, and the partner being involved, and the role of the partner advocating for the person who's giving birth, and also the impact on them. So yeah, I think it's really important to not forget the partners all the way through the process.
And obviously midwives are just so overstretched these days.
Yeah.
And we really need more midwives on the ground, and we really need to bring back the midwifery. You know, the midwives used to be paid to train, didn't they? And that would encourage diversity. Now it's the same as university. It's becoming again just the rich kids that can go to university and go and do this training. And so we need diversity in our midwives, because Black and brown mothers, as we know, have much higher, and Black and brown babies, much higher death rates and injury rates. So I really think the bursary needs to come back. We need to stop midwife bashing. We need to train more midwives and put more midwives on the ground, but also as a temporary measure, possibly, you know, doulas could be funded just as an emotional support, obviously, not in place of a midwife.
Yeah.
And in a way, I know that's depriving midwives of doing the job they really want to do, which is providing that compassionate care. They don't want to sit in a room on their own doing the checkboxing, do they? They have to strap mothers up to continuous fetal monitoring when there's no evidence that it really saves lives overall, and that intermittent monitoring, but they're just having to do what they're told half the time, aren't they? They're having to meet all those, you know, all the medical rules that have come about through this extreme fear of litigation. So to have doulas there providing that emotional support while we try and re-establish midwives in the proper role, as you know, call the midwife. That's midwives how they should.
I mean, that's when you say call the midwife, that's a program we probably all midwives like, because it really emphasizes that relationship and support that we value
in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So midwives are part of the community. So that, Carmen, you've squeezed an awful lot in there, as have you, Laura. I have got some comments and questions coming through there.
Great.
And I've got, first of all, this is for Laura, and this is Geraldine Fowler. you may know. Hi, Geraldine. And Geraldine says, thanks for that, Laura. It looks really exciting. I can't wait to start introducing this resource at our Frome, or is it Froome? I think it might be Froome. I probably pronounced it correctly. And at our Froome Baby Link Young Parent Support Work, you could be in competition or at least compliment my fave icon, Kate Evans.
Oh, I love Kate Evans' books. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The Food of Love, her book about breastfeeding. Yeah, no, there aren't that many books using kind of graphic medicine, but Kate Evans' books, yeah. I mean, she created a fantastic guide for us. She was involved in Maternal Journal, so yeah, I'm a big fan of her. No, I think actually working with young parents, I mean, I think that's one of the aspects of graphic novels is it tends to be quite a popular medium, and it's becoming more and more popular with young people. And people talk a lot about how people don't read anymore and have trouble kind of reading long texts and things like that in the sort of environment that we're in. So I think it does in some ways, and I'm not trying to take away from people reading because I'm a writer, I'm a great reader as well. But I think when it's a lot of information, this graphic form is really helpful to make it more accessible and easier and quicker to access. And it's fun as well. A lot of Lily's drawings are really funny, so it just also makes it not so kind of weighty and maybe even the serious subjects that we cover, it's kind of done in this often funny way or kind of, ironic way. So, yeah, I think young parents would really like this book.
With a slice of pizza in the hand. That I especially like that.
Well, that was actually about right at the beginning talking about the language that's often used about babies being delivered. And so I was making this point, pizzas are delivered, babies are born. And so she did this drawing of herself eating some pizza. So, we tried to tackle some of those, aspects of this kind of rather dehumanizing language that's often used.
I think that section, because I like the history bit that you did as well in the book, because I think we can forget some of the history and where we've come from. That can be quite useful. Now I've got it. Someone has pointed out that I've used the wrong phrase, blue sky. Brain's gone. That's it.
So many platforms now.
That might be confusing people, so sorry about that. Brain block.
Book for myself for Christmas. It looks really fun. And then keep it until one of my daughters has a baby.
That's very good. That's clever. Now I've got Geraldine Fowler. Hi, Geraldine. And Geraldine says, as an IBC, I find the quote about the Colombian midwife very interesting. I frequently interact with mothers who are having experienced exactly this kind of breastfeeding input, feel violated or undermined. It really demonstrates the difference in how actions are interpreted or how they can be communicated in the surroundings verbal and non-verbal communication. And that's I mean, that is so, isn't it? Because we're taught not to kind of be touching women without permission, as it were. But
well, like an English midwife just would not have dreamt of doing that, would they? But
well, they might have done.
Really?
10 or 20 years ago, they might have done. Some midwives were very hands-on because it could be very frustrating if you're watching a baby and a mum struggling. It could be very tempting to just sort it. We like to sort things, us as midwives, I guess.
Well, I mean, in this situation, the mother I call Ava here was really grateful, wasn't she, for that intervention? But I completely get your point. Like another mother might have been completely traumatized by that. So it really is situational, isn't it? And it really depends on the mother's personality. And maybe they'd already been having a chat, and eye contact and all those things, and the midwife just felt that was what that mother needed and that she would be accepting of that as an intervention. Or maybe she didn't think, maybe that's just what they do in Colombia. Shove the mother and baby's bodies together physically and
Well, I suppose that also comes down to our society where we are maybe not as physical. Not used to seeing that, for example, if you're in a smallish family, you're not necessarily used to seeing babies breastfeeding and you're not quite sure what to do. So
I'm a great advocate of the knitted boob.
Yes, indeed.
A lot of my demonstrations with the knitted boob,
And here's one I prepared earlier.
Yeah.
All students should have that. Okay, we've got a question from Juliet Samuel. Hi, Juliet. And Juliet is a midwife in Essex. Was there any correlation between babies who immediately post-birth experience skin to skin and the attachment experienced by mother, or did skin to skin impact on the emotional attachment of mother to baby?
I think, what's your name? Juliet. Yeah.
Juliet.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I think there's research that shows that skin to skin does really help bonding and attachment. Unfortunately, I didn't ask bonding and attachment questions in the survey because I put that up. And then while it was up, I interviewed the mothers and the midwives. So it was only when the midwives and the health visitors started banging on and on about bonding that I thought, oh my God, I should have asked questions about bonding in the survey. So I think what I learned about bonding and why I put bonding into the equation as a really dominant kind of part of the pathway between the birth experience, the mother's mental health, and the baby's behavior. So bonding comes in there. Probably we know that mental health affects bonding, and we know that bonding affects baby behavior and infant development. So it seems, and the midwives and the health visitors seem to have observed through the thousands of births and babies that they've observed that this is the case. That yeah, things like skin to skin really do encourage that bonding. Because it gets the oxytocin flowing, doesn't it? So, and oxytocin is the hormone of love. Oxytocin is the hormone for the birth, breastfeeding, and bonding. So if the oxytocin is flowing in the room, the birth is going to hopefully go more smoothly, unless there's something intrinsically wrong. Breastfeeding, if the mother wants to breastfeed, is going to happen more easily, and the bonding process is also going to happen more easily. And skin to skin is just then a natural part of that, isn't it?
It sort of remind me of when the first work was done by Odont and Le Boyer, when they were talking about making birth areas very cozy, because you used the word cozy, cozy and dark versus bright and noisy. And I wonder, are we getting a bit brighter and noisier and forgetting the stuff that we learned and the things that we like as kind of human people?
It's very basic, isn't it? It's very I wrote this article called The Choreography of Care a few years ago, where I sort of did this whole kind of account of a birth as sort of walking into the room, and the first thing that I did in the room was to rearrange the room, was like make sure the curtains were pulled properly, turn the lights down, move lots of equipment out of the way, like create the best conditions that I could within the circumstances to, generate that oxytocin flowing, that feeling of safety, that, intimacy with their partner and their birth supporters. So yeah, and then throughout that, I was also looking at all the interactions. So I'd sort of described it almost like a dance, a choreography between myself and the woman and her birth partners and other people coming into the room that might then disrupt that. And then you go from a trio to more people, and you're doing a big dance with lots of people. And it was quite an interesting concept.
Absolutely.
To kind of start to try and think about the importance of the environment and the interactions.
Because I think the focus always was mother and baby and partner, mainly mother and baby.
Yeah.
But you now at this point you wonder what the effect is on the midwife. So you've become a choreographer, and I think any of us that read Le Boyer and Odont at that time, we started doing a lot of that, of rearranging, pushing beds to the side, switching off the lights, and then of course, as you were Laura, you've done beautifully. Say when other people come in the room, i.e., other people who haven't read the books, and they start switching on lights. Oh, it's very, very dark in here, and you're back into the sort of trying to explain this is why we're doing it to actually help mother and baby and partner become that little family together and kind of
also
use that oxytocin. It's all that oxytocin, isn't it?
Use the oxytocin not just for that psychological safety and to encourage the new family to be able to build their bonds, but for the physical safety. You need the oxytocin to be flowing like that. And my friend Becky is a community midwife and does exactly what you do, Laura, and what you say you to do. So she goes into the room, dims the lights, rearranges the furniture. Because if you can get the mother and the partner, really importantly, the partner, because of that stress contagion, feeling relaxed, and the birth is more likely to go well, isn't it? The baby is more likely to do well physically as well as behaviorally, and
And we know this on a very basic level, like other animals, we know not to disturb them during birth. And yet again, as I say in my book, it's like I understand a lot of the motivation is to keep people safe and, deal with emergencies and things, but it's also the untold consequences are often this kind of interruption of the physiology. And some very basic sort of principles that we always routinely apply to other animals that are giving birth, but we somehow don't seem to think is important for ourselves.
I mean, you can compare it, and there are some funny videos, aren't there, comparing it to a couple trying to have sex in a very brightly lit room.
Exactly.
Coming in and out.
I'm exactly thinking of that video. I've seen it.
Maybe we should share the link in the resources, Sue, because it really demonstrates, really, and that doctors are coming in and telling them what to do and telling them how to do it, and obviously eventually just give it. They can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's very funny.
Yeah,
I think that's very vivid.
You wonder why birth just halts when
I
arrive in the hospital. Often the contractions just stop, and then before they know it, the woman's on a drip.
And that's the whole thing about it. I mean, when you think about it, and some hospitals are worse than others. I mean, I'm not, it's not just maternity units, but hospitals themselves are scary places where you're out of control. You don't have, and a very important part of this was about choice and about control. And both of you have really emphasized that issue around choice and control and knowledge.
And that can happen even with a cesarean. Why is a cesarean so badly managed so often? I talk about it in the book again, that gentle cesareans, people can, make decisions, make choices about how they want the environment. Obviously, if there's an emergency, I understand that takes over, but particularly a planned cesarean, have music on, you can lower the screen and pull the baby out yourself. The baby can be skin to skin. It does, these things were pioneering, but they really should be part of common practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and those babies are born calm. So not just in my interview sample, but in the larger sample, like planned C-section babies are calm.
Yeah.
It doesn't traumatize the mother, and it doesn't traumatize the baby if they've made an informed choice to have that cesarean.
I mean, I remember at the beginning of my practice sort of insisting that mothers had skin to skin in the operating theatre, and some people being quite annoyed with me and having to negotiate that, whereas now it is much more common practice and it is done.
Thankfully.
But why was it not done?
Well, as Michel Ordon once said on one of his doula courses that I was on, we had to prove that babies need love.
Yes.
I think that's a perfect place to
sorry, we're going over time a bit.
I have to say, now I always say this, and to any new people today, I always say this hour is the fastest in the week, any week. And it's been even faster. It's been a delight to listen to Laura and Carmen. The different books, and it wasn't just about the book, it's about the work that's gone into these books. And I've been trying to get Carmen and Laura for a little while. So it's just fortuitous. They just happen to have a book handy. It's not, it feels a bit like Women's Hour or something. And here I am with my book. But actually, it's the knowledge and the skills and that experience that both of them have shared with us this evening. So I want to say a huge thank you to Laura and to Carmen. Now, I have to just make a conclusion. I just need to remind everybody that this presentation will be available on podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning, if you should like that. And I know it's very popular. So I know it is very popular with people, but also it'll also come out on Wednesday in the newsletter. Now, for those of you who are new to the Maternity and Midwifery Forum, you may not know about the newsletter. You have an opportunity to sign up for that, and that means you automatically get the newsletter with the link to this presentation and many other things automatically. So do sign up if you'd like to. You might have too much other things to do, but this is worth doing. It's worth it. Next week, we're having a break. We're having a little holiday, and I'm going to catch up, like I'm sure you will, with some of the presentations that I might have missed. Not the maternity hour, because I think I've been here for most of them, but certainly for the Edinburgh Festival and the Manchester Festival, worth catching up on that. Now, you might want to catch up. You might have missed last week's session with Sue Down, or the week before with Judith Rees and Caroline Bull talking about domestic violence and abuse, or Becky Lambert-Pitts and Nicola Young talking about gestational diabetes. There's a huge amount to be able to access, and like I said, there's a bit of a health warning once you start watching these things. Worth catching up with. And I'm just do 2 closing comments. I've got Blessmore Changa Map Fira Cooper. Hope I've got that right, Blessmore. She said, very interesting topic, very informative and educative books. And then Diane Garland, hi Diane, says, interesting session for the last of 2025, because we'll be back in 2026. We've got some exciting things to share with you then. We're doing the programme at the moment, even as we speak. And I want to say a big thank you to you for joining us this evening. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you're going to enjoy your Christmas break, festive break, however you wish to celebrate. Take care of yourselves. Make sure you maybe carry a mask in your handbag just in case. That might keep you well. We all need to keep well, and take care of yourselves and your loved ones. And we'll see you in 2026. And thank you again to Laura and Carmel. Take care.
Bye.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers. And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
Nothing, I don't know.